All right, everybody, so welcome back to another episode of Colton Posey Fishing. Today we're going to be talking about the shad spawn. So depending on where you live in the country, you may have already experienced it. You may be starting to experience the shad spawn, or it's not quite happened yet. It just depends on your area. But either way, I'm going to give you some tools, some baits, stuff like that, my knowledge of the shad spawn. That way when it's happening and you identify it, then you can catch a lot more fish. But it's a very fun time to be on the water. Spring is just a fun time to be on the water. You've got bass spawning, you've got the brim spawn, you've got the shad spawn, the carp spawn. I actually really like watching the carp spawn because it's cool seeing 6-7 foot carp spawning on the bank. But either way, it's just an exciting time to be on the water. But let's talk about these baits and how to identify the shad spawn. So stay tuned, it's something you don't want to miss. All right, guys, so talking about the shad spawn, when does these fish typically spawn? It's going to happen in that I'd say mid 60s, 65 up into the low 70s, anywhere between 65, 73 degrees. And once you see it, it's kind of hard not to see it. It's kind of like you'll kind of see the shad, moving in a circle, kind of like a turbine and stuff under the water. And a lot of times when they spawn up against boat docks and stuff, it's kind of like a washing machine rolling over in the water. It's really cool to see it happening. But let's talk about the areas, because that's going to be the most important thing. You got to be able to identify where the shad spawn is going to happen. And most of the time, one of the easiest ways to identify it that tons of anglers utilize is Mother Nature, birds. So actually finding birds first thing in the morning that's close to the bank or close to areas where these shad typically like to spawn is going to be a huge key indicator on identifying or being in an area that is most likely going to have shad spawning in it, and the bass go nuts when it happens. So let's kind of talk about the areas. What kind of areas do I typically look for? I'm typically looking for riprap banks. So if you're not familiar with riprap banks, what I'm talking about is those areas where there's a lot of chunk rock. Okay, a lot of chunk rock is typically going to be around your bridges and stuff like that. They also love spawning around boat docks, but it's typically not the boat docks that are in the ground. So like wooden docks and stuff, doesn't really see it happen much around wooden docks, but like the docks that has the black buoyancy things under the bottom of it, the little floats, those are typically great areas for those shad to spawn. Algae grows on the side of those docks. Those shad eat the algae that's on the dock, and then they also spawn in that same area. And a lot of times you'll find them up in creeks spawning on just random structures that's in the water, I guess you could say. So but the biggest thing to me is finding those areas where there's a lot of docks, okay, or there's a lot of riprap in the area. Those are the two biggest ones that I look for. Now another one, if you start having grass pop up, so whether that's eelgrass or willow grass, whatever kind of grass that you have in there, just nothing really matted, but kind of like that free flowing grass that you can work baits through, they're typically going to spawn around those areas too. So those right there are great, huge indicators on how to find those fish. But the biggest thing is, if I'm looking for shad that are spawning in grass, that's typically when I'm going to utilize those birds more than anything. I may be running down a stretch that I've never fished before a day in my life. Shad spawn's going on. I look over, there's a herring sitting over there eating threadfin shad or something like that. Then I'm typically going to stop on that bank and start casting just to see if the shad are in that area, or the shad spawn can kick up at any time while I'm in that area and catch a lot of fish. But either way, let's talk about the baits that you can use that are very productive during that time. All right, so first we're going to talk about my number one favorite, and that's going to be a spinnerbait. Okay, so but I typically choose the spot sticker spinnerbait when I'm fishing the shad spawn. Number one, I can speed that bait up. Okay, I can speed that bait up extremely fast. The weight's towards the back of the hook, so it's got a real good balance, so it doesn't burn out. Okay, and it just matches the thread fin really well. The spot sticker spinnerbaits is one of my all-time favorites, really, from the shad spawn all the way through fall. So but either way, throwing this bait out there, burning it through the school of shad and stuff like that is typically going to trigger ton of bites during the shad spawn when you're targeting bass. All right, so another one that's well known here in the South anyways, a lot of our grass lakes and stuff, is a swim jig. And a lot of people use a swim jig during the shad spawn. We work it a little bit different, okay, because we've got a lot of grass in our areas, and these shad, when they go to spawn in the grass and stuff, we typically have to pitch these swim jigs up in the grass and work the bait out. Well, one of the easiest ways to do that and to keep that bait clean and to give that bait a lot more action and give it something different than just typically swimming it, we'll actually do what's called popping a jig. So, you know, you're going to throw this bait out there, throw it deep up in that grass, and you're going to pop your rod tip as you're reeling that bait. And as you do that, that bait's going to kind of flutter through the grass. It's going to keep the jig a little bit cleaner. You're not going to get hung up as much and stuff. I typically throw the Strike King Hack Attack jig. There's tons of other brands out there. They're great. 6 Cents makes a great one. But, you know, use whatever jig you feel comfortable with. But the main thing is, you know, using this bait and utilizing it to its full potential during the shad spawn, a swim jig is going to be just a wonderful option. Now, another one that I really like to utilize around docks, okay, it's just been my go-to for years, especially during the shad spawn, but that's going to be that Megabass 110 Junior. And specifically the Megabass 110 Junior, just because it's got a really hard dart action. It's just got a really erratic action, okay? And when those water temperatures, you know, climbing up, I'm typically going to work a jerk bait faster and faster and faster. You know, you guys who's been on the channel for the past several years, y'all know that, you know, I don't ever put a jerk bait down. I have a jerk bait tied on 365 days, okay? I just have a few that I use for different reasons, and the Megabass is definitely going to be that one that I'm going to use from spring all the way through fall because of that real hard, erratic, darty action, and it just catches tons of fish. The only thing I can suggest, you know, buy better hooks, because as you can see on this one right here, I guess you can see on the back, that hook's bent. Hooks just bend out real easy. So I suggest getting better hooks. I'm not sure exactly what size these are, but you know, either way, using that bait around the docks. I'm throwing, you know, if they're spawning on the end of the dock, back of the dock, sides, it doesn't really matter. I'm getting that bait in there and working that bait quickly. Okay, I'm tossing out there. I'm not twitch, pausing for 15 seconds. I'm twitch, stop for 1, 2, start working again, okay? And you're gonna get a lot of reaction bites that way. And just using it around docks, you're not gonna get hung up near as much unless there's some ropes or something like that in the water. But either way, it's a very productive way to catch fish during the shad spawn. Now, another one that I really like to utilize is just that simple, you know, 3-inch swim bait. Sometimes I'll go up to a bigger swim bait. And when I say bigger swim bait, this is a 3-inch, and I'll go up to a 4-inch swim bait, especially if I'm fishing a blueback herring lake that's got bluebacks in it. Then I'll go up to like the 4-inch swim bait. But you know, I'm utilizing this typically 99% of the time either on those riprap banks, keeping it high in the water column, clear water, okay, that's one of the biggest keys, clear, clean water. And then if I'm fishing a blueback herring fishery and I'm trying to find those fish that are feeding on blueback herring during the blueback spawn, then, you know, I'm going to go to the 4-inch and I'm going to focus on those clay points. And that's the thing, we're going to talk about the blueback herring spawn here in just a minute also. So now, one of the other ones I want to talk about this is that Z-Man Mini Max chatterbait. Now, this has become one of my favorite baits to use during the shad spawn, and I'm throwing that Rapala Mooch minnow on the back of it. It's made out of that Elastec stuff, so I mean, you can go 3 or 4 fishing trips really with the Mooch minnow on the back of it. I do it all the time. Either way, I'm typically going to be using this chatterbait around docks. I can skip this under docks real easily. That's one of the main things. Those shad get deep up under those docks, and I need to get a bait down there to them, the swim jig, or, you know, the chatterbait's going to be really the go-to. Me personally, I'm typically going to use that chatterbait because the fish are going to be so aggressive from seeing the shad spawn that they're going to come after pretty much anything you can get around them that looks like a shad. But grass, this is perfect for grass, especially when that grass is just really starting to poke up, but it's not so thick you can't get, you know, a small chatterbait in there. But I'm typically going to use this on my threadfin fisheries. I may go to a little bit bigger chatterbait like the jackhammer or something like that, you know, solid white color. You know, if I'm on somewhere that's got gizzard shad or something like that in it, even blueback herring. But I typically don't throw chatterbaits a whole lot on blueback herring lakes. But either way, these baits baits are going to apply to the blueback herring also if you're fishing a blueback herring lake. But here's the thing, there's a little trick that I want to show you. So if you're still watching, this is definitely something that you need to keep in your back pocket. So one of the biggest things is when these blueback herons start spawning, typically your blueback herring lakes are extremely clear fisheries, okay? I fish Lewis Smith Lake. It is a extremely clear water fishery. So if you get around these bass, especially now that the lake's getting extremely pressured, you start getting close to those fish, they're going to spread out. It makes it really difficult to catch them. It's not like it used to be several years ago. There's a little trick that I utilize with a spinner bait that you can utilize on your lake also, and you'll notice this with threadfin, gizzard shad, whatever type of shad you have in your lake. But either way, what you do, or what I do, take a spinner bait. I'm typically going to throw that 3/8 ounce spot sticker, and I'm going to burn that bait, okay? I'm going to throw it as close to wherever I think the shad are spawning or the blueback herring. 99% of the time it's going to be for blueback herring, and I'm going to burn that bait. And no, I'm not actually trying to catch anything, but what I am trying to identify is if the herring are up there trying to spawn, and that's typically going to be on those clay points. And what I will do is, as I'm burning it, you will actually feel stuff bumping the bait. And what that is the herring actually trying to spawn with your spinner bait. Now, once I start getting those bumps pretty consistently, I know that the blueback herring are up there and they're trying to spawn, and the bass is going to be close by. So typically what I do is I swap to like that swim bait or something like that. And sometimes as you're burning this bait, you're going to catch fish, okay? But I'm typically going to use this to help me identify where the blueback herring are spawning at. But that's just a super simple trick, especially if you don't have sonar. That's kind of how I figured it out when I didn't have sonar. I use this and it just works out, guys. But that's a super simple trick. But either way, guys, if the video helps you at all, make sure to like the video. It helps me out a whole lot. Subscribe down below. I got you covered when it comes to anything bass fishing. Comment if you have any questions, anything to add, or you just want to talk fishing. I love hearing from you guys. Appreciate it, and I'll see you next time.